Man, you guys have a seat. I'm so glad you're here today to worship with us. I'm Jeff, I'm the pastor, and it's Hat Day again for me today. Some of you know I had a little skin surgeries, whatever it is, skin cancer removed from the top of my head. So I have some Band-Aids on. I've asked my family to vote last night and again this morning. The hat, still kind of funky. They're like, you're going to freak people out, just wear the hat. But here, I got to tell you something, man. Thank you all so much for being so generous with your concern and your prayers and all that for me. But I'll tell you what, I'm like 103% today. So I'm really good. And they think they know they got the whole thing. So I'm good. And just, if you will, I know some of you wanted to do some stuff for me, do this. Find somebody that really needs some help right now. See, I had a little speed bump. Some people around here have some mountains to climb. Get on the team with some of those people that climb the mountains and go mow their grass or do something for them that really helps them. You know what I'm saying? Because these guys need it. Someday I might need you more, but this one, if you just pray for me, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for that. Listen, it's back to college time coming up. We have some college kids here today. This will be their last Sunday with us. Some of our kids already left. But, man, college kids, would you guys just wave your hands where you are, getting ready? Those of you getting ready to go to college, wave your hands up high. Look around. Pray for these guys. We love you guys. We want you to know you're always welcome here. We want you here. We're going to be praying for you as you head off to college, and we'll pray for your parents because it's tough on us too when you say goodbye. But you're going to have great years, and I pray you'll just let Jesus rule in your life even there on campus. Know that you're welcome back here. I'll go ahead and tell you a preview. Christmas Eve, 23rd of December, we're going to have this incredible night of candlelight communion. And then we're going to have a special movie afterwards, night of fellowship of sweets and music and stuff. And it's going to be a really good night. So college kids, make sure you're back with us on December 23rd. 24th, we'll have a couple of Christmas Eve services too. So anyway, that's just to welcome you back when you get back for Christmas break. Okay? Well, let's kick off this message a little bit. And I know you guys are still back here, so I got you. Preacher was up getting ready for the next building campaign at his church. He's preaching one day and he's pounding on the pulpit and he takes a moment. He says, "Listen, for anybody who will give $1,000 to the building campaign, you get to choose the next 3 hymns." Little old lady in the back waved her hand and said, "I'll do it, preacher." He said, "Well, thank you, ma'am. What 3 hymns would you like?" She looked around the room. She said, "I'll take him and him and him." And so you never know where people are going to go with what you offer to them. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But oh man, sometimes life really hits you hard. And you may have noticed the love van out front. There's a love van out front, and that belongs to a lady named Tina. Now Tina was an acquaintance, a friend of Nixby Slider, who's a part of our community, of our faith family here at Phos. Nixby got word of the plight of Tina. And Tina is dealing with a real cancer, like a real serious cancer. Like they sent me a picture Nixby did early on about Tina. And Tina had a tumor sticking out of her eye about like beyond a golf ball size. And I'm like, man, it's serious. That's a real challenge. And Tina really didn't have a community around her, and she was driving herself to UK Med Center to get treatments and to get surgeries done. And then when she was released from her surgeries, she would go to her car, to her van, and sleep the surgery off until she got enough energy to drive herself back to Oldham County. All alone. Has 2 teenage daughters and an elementary-age daughter, and they're all beautiful. But what a challenge. And Nixby reached out and began to love on her and began to figure out, how could I be the hands and feet of Christ to this person who's in such a dark, hard place? Sometimes when people are hit so hard, the best thing we can do is just reach out and love them. Well, Nixby brought the need up to us, and then we reached out to the Hartmans. Barb and Rob run a garage here in the area, and Rob's the best mechanic that I know. And we just asked them, hey, could you take a look at her van? Because apparently there's some trouble with the van. And they donated all the labor and lots of love. And Barb risked her life and went and picked up the van and no brakes and trying to get it back to the shop. And Barb's heart is so big and she loves so well. She said, it's not enough that we fix the van. We need to stuff that van with love. And And many of you got an email this week about that we're stuffing that van out front with love. If you didn't get the email, it's because you haven't filled out a Connect card. Tip, okay? Fill out the Connect card, put it in the offering basket later, so you'll know about things like this. And so we've been stuffing that van with love. Our neighborhood's been stuffing that van with love, and it's sitting out front to remind us that we all go through hard times sometimes. We all go through challenging times sometimes, dark tunnels, dark places that are hard to deal with. Sometimes we can't explain God. The best thing we can do in those times is say, yeah, me too. I just love. I love really hard and love really well. And you, as a body, are doing that so well. Barb, thanks for leading the charge on that. Nixby, if she's here, I don't know if she's here. You guys, thanks for leading the charge on that and for loving so well. We're so glad to do that. Because life hits us so hard sometimes that we're left with a couple of questions. Questions are, who are you, God? And why do you do what you do? So today, I want to talk about those hard times. I want to talk about how you find hope in those hard times. There's a song I wanted the band to do. That's why they're still up here. And it's a song by Third Day called Tunnel. Like there's a light at the end of this tunnel. And I want you to hear this as kind of an intro to the message today, as an intro to the times we're all going to face. Even Christ followers are going to walk through tunnels, sometimes dark places, sometimes where God seems a long way off. Today, if all goes well, in this message, you'll leave with hope. So, Mike, thank you all.
I can't begin to know what you're going through. I won't deny the pain that you're feeling, but I'm gonna try to give a little hope to you. Just remember what I told you. There's so much you're living for. There's a light at the end of this tunnel. There's a light at the end of this tunnel for you, for you. There's a light at the end of this tunnel, shining bright at the end of this tunnel for you, for you. So keep holding on. You've got the disappointments and sorrow. You ought to share the weight of that love with me. Then you will find the light tomorrow. Present in the light for your eyes to see. So remember what I told you. There's so much you're living for. There's a light at the end of this tunnel. There's a light at the end of this tunnel for you, for you. There's a light at the end of this tunnel, shining bright at the end of this tunnel for you, for you. So keep holding on, keep holding on. Tunnel, there's a light at the end of this tunnel for you, for you. There's a light at the end of this tunnel, shining bright at the end of this tunnel for you, for you. There's a light at the end of this tunnel for you, for you. Shining bright at the end of this tunnel.
So good. So good. So this is going to be a little messy work here to do in a sermon, because to try to give hope when it's dark and when it's hard and life is tough, it's not always easy. And so I want to go and tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to leave you with a simple formula for understanding God, because I don't have one. He doesn't fit in my imagination. How He does things, why He does things, is way bigger than the box I got. You guys might have a box where God fits in it. I don't. And so I'll go ahead and tell you, I don't have simple, easy answers for who God is or why He does what He does. So I'm going to ask you to pray with me and for me today as I try to come through a message to leave you some hope, because that's really all I got is hope. I got hope. And I want to show you why I have hope from the Scriptures and why you can have hope too. So would you pray with me and for me right now? So God, as we dive into this message, we try to talk about you. You are so far beyond anything any of us can imagine. You are so far bigger than even our universe. You're beyond us. You are timeless and boundless, and beyond even the brightest minds. So God, help us today to just touch the hem of your garment, to know a little bit, to find some healing here as you walk among us. In Jesus' name, amen. You see, we serve a God who knows what it is to suffer too. Scriptures tell us that Jesus didn't grasp eternity. He didn't grasp heaven as something to be hung on to, but He left all that for you and for me to come walk among us. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? That God would strip Himself of all of His godness, would wrap Himself in human flesh, be born as a baby, and come walk among us as Jesus. That's a crazy thing, isn't it? That God would do that. So we worship an unusual God. We serve a God that's hard to understand, who's bigger than our imaginations. We get a little clue to a relationship between Jesus and God. In Matthew 27:46, Jesus is hanging on a cross. And He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And I promise you, God had not forgotten His Son. Some theologians will tell you God turned His back and walked away. I don't think He did. I think He stayed right there in the pain, in the midst of letting His child die. Now, I don't get that. When you figure out this God, come teach me, because He's beyond my imagination. You see, here's the deal. We're all going to have struggles. We're all going to have pain and disappointments and grief in life. It's coming. If it hasn't hit you yet, it's coming. It's going to happen sometimes. For some of you, it's going to happen Wednesday morning early. When you're going to get on a big yellow box that pulls up in front of your house. There's some grief and some stuff that happens with that. But, we're all going to be hit by disappointments. Maybe it's a child who's struggling with addictions, and you dread when that phone rings. You just dread it. I mean, the addictions that people face today, it's a scourge in America like none other. It is crazy. I don't know of any families who aren't impacted at some level by someone who's addicted to something. Now, my sister, I have a niece who's struggling with addiction. My sister lives in fear of the phone ringing because she's not sure what's going to happen next. My sister found a great article about how to help a child who's addicted or a family member who's addicted. They're up here on the stage. If you want to pick one up afterwards for you and your family, then please come do that. We all wrestle with some things, so maybe it's a child with addiction. Maybe you have a spouse who's cheating on you. I mean, that's a pain like none other, and you're trying to work things out. Or maybe it's a husband who's so lost in his work that he doesn't even know you exist anymore. Or maybe you just lost your job, or you're fearing that it's going to happen soon, a lot of uncertainty in your soul. Or maybe the doctor called this week and the diagnosis is not good, and you're facing an uphill challenge in your life, a dark tunnel that we have to go through. Or maybe the love story ended too soon, or the one you loved for so long died way too soon. And you stood at a graveside and you said goodbye. I don't know what grief you face, but we're all going to face grief. We're all going to face what some ancient theologians, ancient Jesus followers called the dark night of the soul. Places we go through where it's dark and it's hard and it's lonely and we're confused. Peter ends in his book, The Sin of Certainty, writes about the dark night of the soul this way when we go through times when we're not certain about even hiking along a wooded trail on the tracks. Moment it seems like a good idea until the weight of your body shifts the car just a little bit and it begins moving down the tracks. It begins to gather speed and it's too fast for you to get out. And before you know it, as it gathers speed, it goes into more and more darkness, a darkness like you've never imagined. As you race downhill, you're certain you're going to die and there's nothing you can see and it gets darker and darker and faster and faster, and your heart is racing and there's nothing you can do. And then finally, after what seems like minutes, you're sure you're thousands of feet down. You enter into a darkness like you've never seen before, and it's so quiet once that car comes to rest that you can hear the blood squishing through your veins. And the darkness begins to control you. You can't see. You try to move around a little bit, but you're not certain of anything. That's what the dark night feels like. And there are moments, there are times in life when you're going to hit that dark space. Jesus followers, you too will probably come to these zones where it seems dark and it seems like there's nothing there. There's nothing you can do about it. You would give your lung for a flashlight, but you're out of control. Dark does that to us. It makes us feel out of control. R.C. Sproul, theologian and pastor, in his book, Discovering Who God Is, talks about a dark night that he faced. A moment in his life before he was even a Jesus follower that brought him face to face with God. He starts this way. I remember Saturday mornings, no school bells, no boring classes, no peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch, no having to sit still without fidgeting. On Saturday, I could release the week's worth of energy trapped inside my 8-year-old body. On Saturdays, I played with my dad. Other children were fine playmates the rest of the week, but Saturday was special. This was the day Dad was home. Our ritual began early. I got up at the crack of dawn and I tiptoed into his bedroom and I would poke him in the ribs. And then, without opening his eyes, he would swoop back the covers and he would grab me and put me in the bed with him. And his beard from the growth from the day before was rough, like rough-hewn lumber. And he would rub it against my skin and he would hold me tight and squeeze the air out of me. And I loved it because I was safe by my dad. As long as he held me tightly, nothing in the world could hurt me. He loved me and he was watching over me. He was there every Saturday morning. One night, I panicked. I was trying to go to sleep and fear hit me. And it rushed over me. I recognized it. And I ran downstairs and I knocked on Mom and Dad's door, and Mom came to the door and she scooped me up in her arms, and Dad woke up and they comforted me, and I said, "You're not going to die, are you?" And after a while, my tears went away and they reassured me and they said, "We're not going to die for a long, long, long time." But they were wrong. 7 years later, the Saturday morning ritual was replaced by a gruesome daily ritual. Each evening at dinner, I went to my father's room where he sat in a large overstuffed chair, and he was drooped to one side, and his mouth hung open to one side. He had had 3 strokes. His body was ravaged, and he was nearly helpless. And all he could do was put trembling hands up toward me. And I would go and pull him up out of his chair And I would turn my back to him and put his arms around myself. And I would hold his hands. And I would take the weight of his body on my back and I would drag him to the dinner table and set him down. By the mercy of God, he had a fourth stroke and he died. I remember going to the graveside with my mother that day. Standing at the edge of a dark hole camouflaged by fake, cheap runner imitation grass. In the distance, cemetery workers dressed in coveralls leaned indifferently on their shovels. Like vultures, they hovered in the background, waiting for the ceremony to end so they could close the grave and get on with their daily work. I watched the minister standing at the head of the grave as he uttered a litany of the dead. His voice rose above the sounds of the wind and nearby traffic. In his left hand, he held a small black book with gold embossed lettering. In his right hand, it was closed. I heard a few of his words, but my attention was fixed on his right hand. Finally, nearing the end of his litany, the minister dramatically stretched forth his right hand and slowly released the sand held in his hand, forming a cross on top of the casket. As he said, earth to earth, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. And the words were final, so final. They played on my brain like a record stuck in a groove. Final, final, final. The minister gently guided my mother away from the grave to a waiting car. I moved behind them in a grim stupor. I was confused. I was hurt. I was angry. Two questions pierced my soul, questions destined to become an obsession for me. Who are you, God? And why do you do what you do? R.C. Sproul is not the first person to ask that question. Who are you, God? It happens several times in Scripture. One of the first times it happens in a Middle Eastern desert thousands of years ago, when a former prince of Egypt becomes shepherd named Moses, tending sheep. He sees a bush burning off to the side. And he comes to look into the bush and to see what's there, and he hears God speaking to him out of the bush, calling him, and beginning to tell Moses what he wanted him to do. And Moses has taken off his shoes, and he's standing at this bush, and as he hears these plans that God is laying out for him, Moses looks into the bush, and he asks the question, who are you, God? God answers, but his answer isn't very satisfying, really. He answers Moses this way. He says, I am who I am. How would you like that for an answer? I am who I am. Well, thanks a lot, God. That's very helpful. I am who I am. And God is sending Moses on a mission that's going to change his life and change the life of millions of people and change all of eternity, really. And yet, the only answer that God will give Moses, this when he's calling to risk his life, is, I am who I am. Would you risk your life to accomplish the mission God has put in front of you if all that God will say back to you about who he is, I am who I am? That's all you're getting. I am who I am. Some theologians study this passage and they talk about a concept called aseity, A-S-E-I-T-Y, and that is that God has always been, will always be. He didn't create himself. He's always been and always be. Now, I don't have any handles for that. I don't get that. That's way too big for my box. I don't get it. But do I have to get it to believe in a God who says, I am who I am? Trust me, I am who I am. That's all you need to know. I am who I am. When you face your challenges in life, sometimes all that God's going to say to you is, I am who I am. You want to question him. You want to ask him, well, who are you? And what gives you the right to do this? And how come you're doing that? And And God sometimes is going to say, I am who I am. Deal with it. Deal with it. Today, not a very satisfying answer, but I want to say to you, if you're facing a tunnel right now, if you're in a dark place, trust the God who says, I am who I am. The book of Revelation, the very end of our Bibles, the writer John tells us about God as he encounters him in his vision of heaven. And he says about God, he says about Jesus sitting on a throne, he says that God says about himself, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the beginning and the end. I'm the first and the last. I have been always and I will be always. A God far bigger than we can imagine. This can bring some hope to us. If we know that everything is His, always has been, always will be, we can settle in as a child of the Most High God. And know He's got this. I don't understand it, but He's got this. Romans 8 tells us that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. If you love God, you're called according to His purpose. Hang on. Hang tight. He's a God. He's a God who doesn't explain Himself. He doesn't have to. Isaiah 55 tells us His ways are higher than our ways. He thinks things we don't think, above what we think. We know that He's creator. The book of Genesis tells us about God creating the world, creating the cosmos. He's the creator. The book of Acts picks up that theme too. And it says this in Acts 17. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is He served by human hands as though He needed anything. Since He Himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. And they should seek God, and perhaps feel their way toward Him and find Him. Perhaps seek their way toward Him and maybe find Him. And that's why you're here at worship today, isn't it? To seek God and maybe find Him. And maybe today we could just touch the hem of God's garment somehow and be healed and find hope. Yet He is actually not far from each of us. For in Him we live and we move and we have our being. Even as some of our own poets have said, for we are indeed His offspring. You are a child of the Most High God. Remember that as you face your challenges. You are a child that's not forgotten. And yet we know that sometimes His children can face challenges. Because we know that John 3:16 tells us that God so loved the world that He gave, who? His only Son, that whoever believes in Him would not perish but have eternal life. And He gave His Son in a way that we can scarcely imagine. He's a God beyond our imagination, beyond our control. So when we give up the need to try to control God or try to define Him into a box we can hold on to, then we begin to come to a place of trust and rest, to know even in the hard times, God is at work doing something. And yet we know, as I mentioned a while ago, Jesus says on that cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's not the first time that's come up. The book of Psalms, Psalm 22, opens the same way. It says this, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from my words of my groaning? You ever said that to God? God, why are you so far away? Why aren't you fixing this now? And sometimes He's not going to fix it when we want Him to fix it. Sometimes He's going to leave us in our pain a little while longer. I cannot make sense of that, but I know that God will not leave you forsaken. Psalm 22 goes on, oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Psalm 23 turns a corner. But God, where are you? Why aren't you listening? But then turns to worship, and that's sometimes all we can do is turn to worship a God who's too big for our comprehension. In the middle of our pain, in the middle of our suffering, in the middle of our tunnel, in the middle of the darkness, we turn and worship anyway. Psalm 22 flows in to Psalm 23. One that's more familiar, that opens this way. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk, where? Through the valley of what? The shadow of death. Come on now. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Because why? Because you are with me. You are with me. This is what we do as Christ followers. In the middle of our tunnels, we turn to worship and we say, God, I know you're still my shepherd. I know you still got me. Imagine being a sheep out in a pasture on a dark night in a big storm and you get lost from the rest of the sheep. That's a scary place. Maybe you even fall down into a ravine or fall down into a creek and you're having trouble getting out. There's nothing like having the shepherd come and scoop you up and then wrap you around his neck and take you back to the flock. Imagine that right now while you're in your dark tunnel where it seems like all is lost. There is a shepherd who's looking for you. There is a shepherd who loves you. There is a shepherd who wants to carry you home. He's going to take you through the valley. He's not going to leave you in the valley. He's taken us through. To walk with Jesus is to be on a journey. It's to be in motion with a God who loves us in spite of our understanding about what's going on. It's to see beyond our circumstances into a God who loves us dearly. So he's taken us through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I shall dwell where? In the house of the Lord. How long? Forever, baby. Come on now. Come on now. This is good, right? This tunnel isn't going to last forever. God's going to get you. He's going to bring you through. He's going to take you out. He's not going to leave you in the pit. He's got you. He remembers you. He sees you. He's not going to leave you there because he's going to bring you through the valley of the shadow of death. To give you life for how long? Forever. If you're a child of God, you've got these tremendous promises. Do not let go of these. So he's a shepherd who walks us through the valleys of the shadow of death. The dark takes our breath away. But we've got a God who's near, who says, fear not, I've overcome the world. And who comforts us like one who's closer than a brother. That's who God is. So, when life drops you to your knees, and you're shrouded in darkness, and you want to know who this God is, and you ask in your soul, God, who are you? He's all that we've talked about, and more. He is Jesus, and he is the light at the end of your tunnel. Would you pray with me?